Good evening, everybody. Please be aware if you are attending this meeting, our meetings are recorded for future viewing, and we are privileged to gather on the traditional territory of the Kwakwaka'wakw. We'll call the meeting to order. And before we adopt the agenda, ask please that under petitions, Kevin Brooks from McElhaney be added to answer questions about the zoning bylaw. Are there any other additions or amendments to the agenda? None. Can I have a motion then to adopt the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 3, and invite Kevin Brooks into our meeting. And good evening, Kevin. Thanks very much for joining us today. We've got all of council present. Do you have a good drive home?
Not awesome. My car ended up breaking down and my engine seized, so it was fantastic.
Oh no, was that last night or this morning?
Last night.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh well, that's what happens.
Whereabouts? Within cell range?
Just 5 kilometers south of Sayward.
Oh no. All right. Okay, so I will open up the floor for councillors. If anyone on council, if you have any questions pertaining to any of the questions that were asked last night, and yeah, zoning changes, anything. Would like to go first. I'm sort of half up. Councillor Barron, go ahead.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if I was turned on. Okay, up on Mine Road, Kevin. We got the colorblind girl here. So if you go to Campbell Way, and there's 2 properties that are a pink to the left of Campbell Way.
Yes.
South on the map. Gabby tells me that that's CS1, commercial zone 1. So I just wanted to confirm that that's what that pink is.
Correct. That area is proposed to be zoned commercial service 1.
Okay, so the Royal Canadian Legion is the second property in. So they would then become legally non-conforming?
I'd have to look exactly at the zone if you give me a moment. But I would suspect yes. They would also be deemed, I think, legally non-conforming now.
Okay, but if it was CS2, do they fit the definition of community hall or center?
There is no CS2 in the proposed zoning bylaw.
I think so. Sorry, C2. Yes, that's the other pink, right? Yes.
Zone 2, yeah, C2.
And if they don't fit the definition of a community hall, what would they be defined as?
Yeah, I believe they would fit the definition of a community hall. Based on the existing definition.
Okay. So, but they wouldn't fit the proposed
CS1.
CS1. So they wouldn't be able to expand, or if it burned, they wouldn't be able to repair.
They'd be deemed legally non-conforming, that is correct.
Is there a possibility that we could either zone them as the one that has a community hall in it, or could they be spot zoned in that same one to then include a community hall so that they would be able to, for instance, expand their kitchen that they've been trying to do for 20+ years?
Yeah, certainly. That is something that council could contemplate if council wanted to do so. You could do, I would recommend if you wanted to do that, it'd be a spot zoning for community hall to allow to regularize that use on that site.
Okay, because where the Lions Hall is, is brown. I think. Or is it gray? I'm sorry.
Looks great. That's public use because.
That would be
that's
the
brown.
school?
No, sorry, that is.
Is that the
Yeah.
school or is that the community hall or the Lions Hall?
No, I think the Lions Hall is here. I think that's the
Lions Hall
school.
is gray.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay.
This is on property, but they lease. That's
public
use.
And that's public use zone. So it's, we're not putting the Lions Club into a legally non-conforming.
That's the existing zone of that site already.
Yeah,
So
okay,
it wouldn't be changing anything that already exists.
okay. Do you want me to wait for the next question? My other question was just, we heard a couple of times last night, and it was in a couple of the submissions about this idea of dual zoning.
Mhm.
And particularly for the ones downtown that are going from industrial to commercial.
Mhm.
Is that something that would be a blanket thing that could be done? Is it something that they would have to apply for? Is it something that we could say they could apply for? And would it still kind of fit the vision of if they had the ability to do either or, it would be attractive as opposed to the connotation right now that it's negative to go to the commercial? But if they had that opportunity to rent either way, it would be, you know, like attractive, for lack of a better word.
That's an excellent question. So there's no such thing really as dual zoning. There are a couple options that council would have in regarding looking at the industrial in the downtown, specifically that M1 zone lands. So there's a couple questions there, and I'll unpack the different questions you had. You had some questions with regards to aesthetics and controlling of aesthetics. The zoning bylaw can only do so much. And when there's an existing use, there's nothing you can fundamentally do to take that existing use and force them to become aesthetically attractive until they actually propose a new use and then go through the development permit process and things of that nature. That's why the development permit guidelines exist, is for new development to look nice. Existing development, council wants to work with the property owners on beautification in that area. It'll likely be through incentive programs or revitalization programs, which are not part of your zoning bylaw package. So that'd be a different program that you'd have to establish. In regards to the zoning piece, there's a couple different options we can look at. We heard very, very clearly that the property owners that are in the M1 zones aren't in favor of the transition to the C2. One of the options is it's not a dual zoning, but again, you could do like a spot zoning for the properties that fall within the downtown that would allow them to do both C2 uses and the M1 uses in that area specifically. What that does is begin to capture the vision that's in the OCP and transition those properties while protecting and grandfathering the existing uses on there in a regularized legal manner. So it doesn't create them legal non-conforming. It allows them to continue on as they are now, but also provides the opportunity that if there are C2 uses or those commercial uses that are envisioned in the community plan, that they could then bring those uses onto the site. When they did so, and they establish those uses, that's when the development permit guidelines apply, and then your property beautification guidelines that you can utilize to work with those property owners to move in that direction as envisioned by the community plan.
Sorry, and if they as a group decided that they were all gonna kick in $1,000 and make it beautiful as this process goes on or doesn't go on, however we have to have a bylaw about,
So if
like, they have to apply or no? I mean,
the mechanism for the town to actually work with a group of individuals is called a business improvement area. And so you actually establish a business improvement area. With that goes a business improvement area bylaw. And that allows the town to then work with property owners, collect money from each of the property owners and utilize that for beautification of an area. So that is the formal way of doing it. I'm not familiar with any informal ways of a town working with to collect funds and apply those to private lands, because there's challenges under the community charter with assisting of business. So like I said, the formal way is through that business improvement area, establishes a business improvement area, collecting of funds through that established business improvement area, and then the improvements to that area, working with those business owners through that mechanism.
So they could come to us and say, hey, we're thinking post and beam, black and purple, and we're going to go have at her. And we could have a conversation with them, but you're talking about actually taking money from them and us doing that in that sense. Okay.
If the town wants to initiate it, it needs to be consistent with the Community Charter and Local Government Act. If the business owners all want to get together and improve their businesses as a group, that's fully on them as private landowners to be able to do that.
Thank you. Go ahead. Absolutely. Go ahead, Councillor Cole.
Yeah, Kevin, so just the scenario that somebody has an M1 property now and their use is grandfathered. In one corner of their property, they have room for another building. Could they continue the M1 use and put up a C2 brand new conforming building and do both uses at the same time?
So if council is to proceed with the zoning as proposed, changing it to C2, then no, they would not be able to. And the reason being is that there is an existing non-conforming use on that parcel.
Thank you. Councillor Downey, go ahead.
Some clarity here that properties are often owner occupied. So you have on the site, you'll have the property with its structures, but you also have an operating business. If the operating business is sold and somebody else takes over the operating of that, is there any change to the zoning?
No, there is not.
And vice versa, if the property is sold to another party and the operating company remains there, is there any changes in zoning?
Nope, there is not.
Both of those are subject to the 6-month non-usage. Is the only way they would be affected.
Yeah, exactly. Ownership does not impact the legal non-conforming. Legal non-conforming runs with the land. If you're operating that business and you keep that business operating, no matter who the owners are, without a gap of greater than 6 months, it can continue to operate in perpetuity.
Okay, so if you have a business which meets the criteria of, well, for example, M1, an auto repair shop.
Mhm.
Auto repair shop closes its doors and in comes a paint shop, a body shop. So it's still, both businesses are industrial. They would meet that criteria. Is that deemed a change in use, or would it be permitted?
It comes down to the definition of the zoning bylaw. If it falls under the same definition of the fundamental use that was being operated prior to, then it would be considered fundamentally the same use and could continue. If it is defined in the zoning bylaw as a fundamentally different use, then no.
Okay, so for example, our let me find it right here. To be specific, so principal uses, auto body repair, auto repair shop, a lumber yard. So a lumber yard is there, they exit, in comes a restaurant. I mean, is this my old one or new one? It's my new one, sorry.
Yep.
So it's still, both those principal uses fall as permitted uses under the M1. So there'd be no problem with that.
No, it comes down to if it's rezoned to C2, if they stop using the lumber yard and were to reestablish a different use, it has to be compliant with the zones now permitted in the adopted zone.
So it would not be permitted to operate any other business, even though they meet the criteria of a industrial M1.
Yeah, because as soon as we rezone, it goes from M1 to C2, the M1 no longer applies to that property at all. It's the C2 that applies. The use that is existing at time of rezoning is allowed to continue in perpetuity, but it has nothing to do with the previous zone. It has to do with the time of the use being established when the actual bylaw was adopted. So the M1 zone is no longer applies at all to the property.
Okay.
Can I follow up on that, before Councillor Downey asks another question? So when you're saying fundamentally different, that means it has to be something similar to a lumber yard. That's,
Yeah,
Correct.
so if someone was running a lumber yard, and they sold the property, say they stopped use, sold the property, and in 3 months, someone else purchased it and wanted to reestablish a use there, it would need to be a lumber yard or fall under the same definition of lumber yard as illustrated in the zoning bylaw to be considered a legal non-conforming use permitted on that property if the C2 zoning were to be adopted as part of the proposal now.
thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Downey. Did you have another question?
Somebody
Oh,
else
okay.
take a stab. I've got more.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
I'm trying to get it clear in my mind to Kevin through the mayor. If we have the allowance of 2 zones, which you mentioned, you could have the property, let's just pick one, the Comox Valley distribution, the freight forwarders there, and they decided to take the dual zoning. Is that what you would call that?
No, what it would be is we'd provide a spot zoning specific that would allow the M1 uses to continue. But yes, let's say call it dual zoning for ease of understanding.
Okay, and even though they might have space, they wouldn't be permitted to put up a commercial building on that property that was falling under the commercial zoning.
If they had the dual zoning as we're talking about, yes, they would be able to.
They would be able to, okay?
Yeah, if we did the dual zoning approach, yes. If we rezone to C2 and they have a legal non-conforming use on the site, then they cannot exacerbate or impact that legal non-conformance, right? And so it's really hard to say specifically, but because it becomes a case by case basis depending on the nature of the site. But in general, no, they wouldn't be able to establish another unless they're 100% legal conforming for a particular use. So it's very hard to answer because of the complexity when you get into that legal non-conforming question.
It isn't very practical, in other words. My next question related to that would be, is there a mechanism? We've obviously changed this in the official community plan to show that our designation for that property long-term is commercial. Is there any reason why we can't simply leave it out of the bylaw and leave it alone the way it is and let market forces determine when that property changes from industrial to commercial? Because the best and highest use of that property will change as the community changes, and industrial land is always, in every community I've been in, the cheapest land that you can buy, which is why Walmart buys them and then develops them and converts them to commercial. And maybe just leaving it alone, as long as we've got it in our official community plan, then somebody can come along and say, hey, I want to put a hotel there. And they go to the landowner and they buy it from him and he moves to an industrial property because it makes him money. It has a business case. Can we just do that? Is that a possibility?
Through your worship, 100%. You have a spectrum of options here. One of the options is to leave the zoning in the downtown exactly as it is. That is one of the options, and it is a very fair option. The middle option that we've kind of talked about is that idea of dual zoning. That dual zoning begins to shift those properties more towards that commercial land, but still sort of legally grandfathers the use. And then the last option, which is the option that we discussed at the public hearing last night, is completely rezoning it and making the uses legally non-conforming by rezoning it all to commercial now. So those really are your 3 options that you can deal with in your downtown. So you do have some options there. All of them are valid under the way that the OCP is currently written, because that OCP is a long-range vision of what you want to see down there. So you do not need to make your zoning consistent with the OCP at this time if council deems it not necessary.
And really the grandfathering clause, it's such a friendly term. You're grandfathered in. Sounds like it's going to be all okay. When in reality, you're frozen in time. That's really what it means. You're frozen in this space and time. You can't make any changes to that piece of real estate. You can just operate it the way it was. You can keep the building alive, and you can't make it bigger, you can't change its use, you can't do a whole bunch of things. So really, you're not grandfathered in to operate your business the way you may have, which is morphing along over 40 years. It changes and evolves and it becomes something completely different than what it started. And so really, you're frozen in time, and eventually you become redundant and you can't operate there anymore. In this day and age, that's what will happen. So I don't know that I'm real happy with that.
Thanks. I have a question. One of the owners from Island Foods was talking about the possibility of expansion, so that would be out. Okay, thank you.
That is correct.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Downey.
One question I heard from a few property owners is how would the value of their property be impacted? Because we're taking M1 to C2. On the other side of town, we're moving some from C2 to M1. What are the implications?
Yeah, the implications will vary. And so how assessments and property values work is BC assessment will set a class on a property. That class typically mimics zoning, but doesn't always mimic zoning. And so you get a class at BC assessment. And so you have your bulk classes, which are residential, industrial, commercial, institutional, your bulk classes. And then they look at the land improvements. And so right now, I don't know where the classes lie in Port McNeill, what is deemed more valuable than the other. I suspect, as Councillor Mitchell has mentioned, commercial property is typically deemed more valuable than industrial, but due to the lack of industrial land in McNeill, that could be different in McNeill right now, just due to the lack of stock of industrial land right now.
So a scenario that we heard last night, there isn't the industrial land is already occupied. Save, maybe a couple properties that people are holding, haven't built on yet, but there is no new industrial land. As I consider this and I think about the property owners adjacent to our town sitting on land who've been waiting for our official community plan to be completed, with these new proposed zoning, moving M1 to C2 in the downtown core, I wonder if that then would persuade the property owners outside, just on our boundary here, to then consider opening up lands and selling it as M1.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me that would be something that would compel an action, whereas if we stay status quo, there would be no compunction or for that property owner to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very much a possibility. And it's one of those reasons why we did identify those future boundary extension areas. It was predominantly for the vision of future industrial lands closer out to the highway.
Thank you.
I don't quite understand, though, Councillor Downey, maybe you can clarify for me how that would change things, because if an owner from downtown didn't want to move, there's still only a certain amount of industrial land. So I'm not understanding how that would wouldn't they be propelled to do that regardless of, if it's needed, it's needed?
Right now, there is all the land that is downtown is occupied. It's occupied. There is no M1 being brought forward right now. As a property owner, they may say, here's a property class that is not, that is insufficient in available properties. There's an opportunity. We're sitting on land. Let's do something with it.
Oh, I misunderstood. I thought you were saying that changing it to C2 would compel them. Yeah, okay, thanks. Sorry.
So follow up to that one, Kevin, some of that land that we earmarked, I think, was actually currently Crown land. So if we have it in I think along the lines of what Shelley's saying, if we have it in the official community plan that it's to be commercial downtown, that we're eliminating the industrial, would that be a compelling argument? Because I think if I remember way back when we started this, you said that sometimes you need that when you're bargaining with the government essentially for Crown land. So that would, I think that's kind of what you're saying. would that give us a bit of
Leverage.
an argument leverage in trying to get the Crown land, say up on the top end of town, to be going to M1, because we may spot zone or dual zone for the existing businesses that are there, but essentially there is no new M1, as she's saying. So does that kind of give us a bit of a leg up, or is it just a crapshoot?
So there's two things. I'll start with the first one. We have proposed some extension of the M1 lands towards Port Hardy along Mine Road. So there is some additional M1 lands that we have proposed for rezoning. And there's some questions that came out of conversations about that, whether it should be M1 or actually heavy industrial. That was some of the conversations I had with property owners. So there's that piece. The second piece is we've identified the lands up at the top of the hill as future expansion area. And the predominantly reason for that was because it makes most sense for future industrial expansion. That is what's important as a signal to those property owners, was the work that we did as the OCP identifying when we expand, be aware that this is where we want to expand. So that was the important piece. The signal sent through zoning isn't as a strong signal. The signal that the town sent was really through the adoption of the official community plan in those areas as potential future boundary extension areas.
Councillor Cole?
Thank you, sir. Just to speak to the boundary expansion, the Crown land, I think we're referring to is like that real swampy area right in front of town, and I don't think it's suitable. And the rest seems to be private forest land. My question for you, Kevin, is it possible for us to partner with the regional district who has this jurisdiction right out of town, like along East Main? There's just a level spot, the roads are in. Can we do some sort of partnership with them to get it going on right away? Like the message I got at UBCM, et cetera, is the government's not giving out any Crown grants for land. And if they are, it's going to be a long process. So is there an opportunity for some sort of quick win for regional districts to create a regional, like an industrial park with the landowner and have a cost sharing arrangement? That's in terms of the revenue that comes in from it.
Yeah, through your worship, it's certainly a possibility. Even if you were to do a boundary extension, you actually have to be a partner with the regional district to do extensions into regional districts. So whether you do some satellite project or you do it directly against your boundary and you extend your boundary, you're going to have to be a partner with the regional district for it to be successful.
Councillor Barron?
Chickens.
What would you like to talk about with chickens?
I just wanted to see you smile. So again, back in one of these conversations that we had a long time ago, I said I wanted a permit system in place. So right now we have the chicken thing. So here's your chicken rules, but we have no way of making it. How fast can we do that once this goes through? And can we prep that with the idea that this is going to happen, or how does that work? Because I'm not comfortable to have a zoning bylaw that has the chicken part in it without the process for having the chickens.
Yep.
And I do believe that it's better to have the chickens in there so that we have there's expectations. So if you want to have them, this is the expectation. And I mean, the electric fence is in there. So how do we do that so that it's successful, so that it's not just chickens on the paper?
Through your worship, excellent question. So there's again, just like with the zoning of the M1 lands in the downtown, we have a bunch of options. So we have this spectrum of options we adopt as is, or other tools that the town can utilize for managing chickens. First off, the issues that are going on now are a bylaw enforcement issue. Chickens are not allowed, right? And so we're dealing with a situation where we have a bylaw enforcement issue. Chickens aren't allowed. Chickens have occurred, and I don't know what the level of enforcement was. I haven't been involved. But so there's almost two issues that were spoken about last night. 12 chickens is a lot of chickens, right? You will never find an urban chicken bylaw that allows that many chickens, right? For the fundamental reason that they create manure and they smell, right? You typically see 3 to 4 chickens in an urban chicken bylaw, and there's lots of different reasons, but has to do that, believe it or not, chickens are actually social creatures and need other chickens around to be able to lay eggs. So where does that leave us? Knowing we have a bylaw enforcement issue on our hands, which has created an issue where you basically have created a very divisive situation in the community. Well, option one, get rid of the chickens out of the zoning bylaw now and do a program to work through a animal control bylaw that deals with chickens specifically. And in the meantime, allow chickens through something like a temporary use permit or something like that if people want them. What that allows is council to control each application on a case-by-case basis. It allows the neighbors to comment on the chickens. It allows council to put conditions on that developer chicken farmer in regards to how it is operated, maintained, and council can rescind that temporary use permit at any time if the conditions of the permit are not met. What that would allow council to do is begin to test the rules out that we've developed while dealing with the bylaw enforcement issue challenges that are currently occurring within the community. So that's one option. It's comprehensive. It's going to take administrative, if a lot of people come forward, it'll take, administrative time and council time, but I think it will give council the most amount of management over the issue. The other one is we go with the zoning bylaw and we say, yeah, you can have chickens without the animal control bylaw in place, and that could create additional challenges that we're seeing now. Right. And so there's sort of your three options. Get rid of it altogether, sort of that middle option of get rid of it out of the zoning bylaw, but really utilize the stuff we wrote for the zoning bylaw as a tool for temporary use permit approach. While you're trying to develop the animal control stuff, or the third option of you basically get rid of it altogether, sort of thing.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Mayor Wickstrom. Yeah, Kevin, can you comment on, like, looks pretty clear to me, M1, there's no provision for second story residential. And currently all along Mine Road, I could think of, maybe a half dozen places that already have apartments above.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, if those apartments were empty for 6 months, would the person be able to rent them out again?
Mm-hmm.
And, or could we, what was the thought between no second floor residence? Because to me, that makes sense. If we could get in a light industrial area, somebody could build their shop and live above. We all know the housing problems right now. So why didn't we consider that? And is this a viable option for us to simply add second floor housing to M1?
So my understanding of the existing M1 zone, it doesn't actually explicitly permit rental or apartment or anything on the second floor now. What it did permit is a suite for a caretaker or security uses and that, which the proposed M1 zone also permits, right? It doesn't say where it has to occur. It could be actually a separate building with a suite in it or something like that. So it doesn't define that. So a caretaker suite is permitted in the M1 zone, which means someone could go and build their shop and have their house above it if they wish to do so under the M1 as proposed.
Could I just interject on there? I did look at the secondary suites and right away it's no more than 2 bedrooms, so to me, I get the intent of that, but I live above my building with, I need 2 bedrooms. And so I could see how that's a little bit limiting, but I'll let you continue.
Through your worship, I don't have any additional comments there.
Any other questions? Councillor Barron.
So it could be a really quick one. Under accessory buildings, and I think this was true in our last zoning too, and I'm just curious why. They shall not be closer to the front property line than the exposed building face of the principal building.
Mhm.
So if you had a fairly large lot and you have you have your house and then you have like a side yard, let's call it,
Mhm.
and you're going to build a garage, but your back line isn't straight. You know, like a lot of our lots, I mean, the two variances that we saw in April were literally because the back line, we don't have postage stamps, we don't have squares, we have octagons, for lack of a better word. So is that something that someone, if they were going to build, let's say a garage on the side, that they could apply for a variance to be like 4 feet out, or like what is it, what is the aesthetic of that? Is it so that you stand and you look down the street and everybody's kind of the same, which they're not, because some are set further back? Like what's the reason for that?
Through your worship, thanks, Councillor Barron. That's exactly what it is. So it's basically about this idea of creating a street wall and a streetscape, and that's why you basically have that no protruding beyond the principal building provision. Yes, it can be dealt with through variance. That is exactly what development variance or our board of variances are for, is to address those types of situations where someone is looking at building, they can't actually achieve what they're looking to do because of the way the bylaw is written, and that's the exact purpose for variance.
Okay, Councillor Cole.
Thank you. I guess just one more comment. I mean, it sounded sort of great. We forget about this dual zoning, maybe the best of both worlds for a landowner. But we've all talking about the uses that we see now, but somebody could buy that building tomorrow. I always like to say the devil could buy it and make a whole lot of racket and noise. And I think we've really overlooked the noise factor of the potential of some of these businesses and the current noise that they make. So if I'm going to build a hotel like Ryan suggested, or I'm thinking or hoping more condos or housing or Berwick or something, I'm going to probably not be too enthused if across the road at any time there could be a pile driving building factory or engines revving. And I think we got to decide where we want to go. Like, are we going to take this real forward looking initiative, or we're just going to keep doing the piecemeal thing, which we've been doing? And we have heard from the business owners, but during the OCP process, we heard overall from our residents that they want the town beautified and the industry out of town. So we either didn't do a proper job with our focus groups and we got that wrong, or we've got the majority of the town wants that out, but now we're like, ooh, we're going to upset 5 different business owners. So it's really a struggle, but I wanted to bring that point up. It's like, we're either going to take a real good vision, and I don't know where we stand, but this one way or the other. In the perfect world, if we had a light industrial area sort of ready to go and more planned, and we had the opportunity to do that 3-4 years ago, this would feel better to me. But to me, it's like there's nowhere for them to go. So it is a catch-22, but I just wanted to bring up those bigger picture issues with noise and this dual spot zoning preventing the attractive kind of community that I think we're hearing we want. We've heard it around council table and from the community. And so that's my last comment, I think.
Any final questions?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Councillor Downey, go ahead.
Under the RM1 zone, I'm just looking at everything now. We have low-rise apartments, 12.2 meters. How many stories would that be? We're looking at a 3-story building?
Yeah, 12.2 would be approximately 3 stories. That's correct.
Okay. What does that look like if we have commercial on the bottom? Are we still, we'd be 1 floor commercial, 2 floors of residential?
That is correct.
So that's probably a conversation we're going to have with council. I will say that I'm looking at densification, and I think if we're serious, you know, this is probably too low and we should consider the availability or the option of increasing the height of an apartment building within our town limits. 3 floors nowadays is not a lot. We have seniors who wouldn't mind something like that with a view, but likely it would need an elevator. A 3-story building probably isn't feasible to put in an elevator, but 4 or 5 might be. So I don't know. That's kind of where I'd like to see us go, is consider, you know, taller buildings, just to make it practical for the construction of it, the building, elevators, and access. So one question I do have is, we have in our definitions modular homes. Modular home, but nowhere's in the zonings do I see modular home referenced. I see manufactured homes, but I don't see modular. Why is that?
Through your worship, Councillor Downey, thank you. That's an awesome question. So there's a fundamental difference between a manufactured home and a modular home. And so when you look at the definitions, you'll look at a manufactured home, and manufactured home is what we used to call mobile homes, right? They're built under CSA Z240 for mobile homes, and those are basically what we used to call mobile homes, right? Or trailers. A manufactured home, or a modular home, sorry, in and of itself is a prefabricated building. So basically they build the actual building on site, whether wall panels or parts of houses, and they actually construct it and put it together and on site on a foundation. So they're fundamentally different. So the modular home is the one that's built in a factory, meets BC building code, and is assembled on site, where the manufactured home is built under CSA Z240 and is what we used to call trailers or mobile homes. So that's the fundamental difference between the two. The reason that modular home isn't mentioned specifically is because any single detached dwelling or apartment or townhouse built in your community can be built using modular technology under the building code and the Building Act. We wanted to have it in the zoning bylaw just to differentiate between the two of them, so there wasn't confusion if someone were to propose a modular home on a single lot or build townhouses utilizing that form of construction.
Okay, and can you clarify then, mass timber construction? We hear a lot of it and it's being used now for apartment buildings.
Yep.
Where would that fit in here?
Mass timber construction, there's probably not any building that'll be built in the near future in Port McNeill that would utilize it. Usually mass timber construction is used on 6+ story buildings, like really tall buildings. And so your mass timber construction, usually you'll see 8+ stories in mass timber construction these days. Most sort of the 5-story and below still use sort of stick frame type construction typically. You can build it with mass timber, but because of the mass timber isn't cheap, it's just cheaper when you start comparing it when larger buildings when compared to concrete construction and things of that nature. So, but that's where mass timber construction comes in larger buildings. It's usually that 6, 7, 8 stories and up.
So where I'm going with this is we need housing. Mass timber will permit a building to be constructed, framed 30% faster than stick frame. And like I said, we need housing. And so where, or is there a place for that in here if we were to designate an area where we would want a 6-story building?
We never contemplated buildings of that size during the OCP or during the zoning. You rarely see that size of building constructed on a regular basis in larger centers. And so it wasn't something that was contemplated. If something that council wants to contemplate, we could certainly take a step back and look at, okay, if you're going to put up high buildings, where should they be? Because your fundamental concern when you start building 6-story buildings is view planes, right? So we'd need to take a step back and go, okay, what's the view plane analysis look like? What views are we impacting? And based on that, where does it make sense to allow for height to occur within the community. And that's not not something we contemplated.
No, I absolutely realize it wasn't something we contemplated. It was just something I've kind of learned about and twigged. So that would be something we would deal with on a case by case if the proponent came forward.
Exactly. And typically what you see with rezonings of that nature, because they'd need to rezone, likely because the amount of density would be quite a bit higher likely than what's currently permitted in the bylaw. You get them at that point in time to do that view plane assessment, to look at how it's going to impact view planes, how it's going to impact the community, and assess that on a case by case basis.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
So just one more thought, there are some advantages of somebody's M1 going to C2. And they can all see the uses, but I did want to point out the setbacks are quite a bit different. So suddenly now you can build 7.6 meters to the road. Before you were back 15.1. Zero offset on a side yard next to, with the exception of residential, 7.6 meters on M1. 90% coverage of your lot on C2, 80% on M1. And then obviously C2, now you can have legal suites. Airbnb is totally fine, second floor, rentals, whatever. So there are some advantages. And just wanted to point those out. Maybe people haven't thought of those.
So this zoning bylaw will be on the next agenda. And sorry, I'll just ask, were there any other further questions for Kevin before he leaves? Okay.
I just have one. I want some clarity on when we read the agenda for the public meeting. It says that no further input can be sought, blah, blah, blah. So we're going to be looking at this again. What are we limited in some way who we can talk to and what we can talk about? Because we've been warned numerous times on bylaws that once the public hearing is done, we can't talk to people about it.
Mhm.
And so now I'm hearing that that's okay. And I'm going, I'd like to see something, a little bit more clarity on that.
Yeah, Kevin, go ahead.
Through your worship, Councilor Mitchell, that's a very good question. So no new information is able to be presented to councilors from anyone in regards to the bylaw prior to adoption or prior to making changes and going back to a new public hearing. So that is correct, Councilor Mitchell. So you can't go out and chat about all of it with the public and things of that nature. The things we've talked about today are all things that we have talked in the past and were discussed last night, so it's not new information. Now, if we're going to proceed with changes or proceed with additional conversations with like business owners or something like that, at that point, that would be new information and would automatically trigger a new public hearing.
So we would not have to move it back to first reading. We would simply trigger a new public hearing.
That's correct. You don't need to rescind readings. It's if you have new information, you have new conversations, it triggers a new public hearing. And then that new information must be presented at that public hearing, so it's transparent and everybody has access to it.
Which reminds me, there was a letter that you were going to bring that got missed.
Yes, Tyson sent in a letter. I did send it through, but I'll send it through again to make sure everybody has access to that letter. And it basically, Mr. Tyson had mentioned that he was not in favor of the M1 zoning, or the M1 rezoning to C2.
Can I ask one more question to follow up Councillor Mitchell's concern there? So the fact that nobody brought up C-cans last night, for an example, means we can't change the C-can rule or talk about C-cans?
No, council has the opportunity now, because we're still at second, to talk about anything council deems they want to talk about and amend the bylaw however you wish. If we do so, we need to go back to public hearing, and that's not a bad thing. You guys heard your community last night. You have an opportunity to either proceed as is or change it. If we proceed as, the only way to go to adoption from this point is to proceed as is. If we change anything, it must go back to public hearing.
Got it. Thank you. That clears up that one.
Okay.
Sorry, one last colorblind question. Campbell Way and It's a tree. Goes this way. So there's empty property between McNeil Road and Campbell Way. Were those all the commercial zone 2 previously? Or are they commercial zone, see, are they CS1? Sorry, could you just tell me what that whole chunk, I'm assuming it's all the same color. Like this is pink, right? This color here, all of this is what?
Total mixed bag. Some was M1, some was C2, some was
And we've put it all to C2. Didn't realize we'd done that.
There were 3 different zones.
Great. I think, thank you very much again. I think we have all our questions answered. That'll help us contemplate over the next 2 weeks. So thank you for your time, Kevin. You are free to go.
Very good. Everyone have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the zoning bylaw will be on the next agenda. Wondering perhaps if there's an appetite for council to have a committee of the whole an hour prior to, so we can talk about some of the cases that were pled here and some of the ideas. How does council feel about that?
Having a discussion an hour before a public meeting where we're going to consider third reading, I don't see value in that, because perhaps we would have substantial changes that we might be looking for. So perhaps we should have a meeting a bit further ahead of the next public meeting, or we defer this until a July public meeting.
My thought was during the committee of the whole, that would become evident where the majority of the council might lie. And so there would be no, if there's a big change, there'd be no unction to go to third reading during the regular meeting. But I can circulate an email and we can decide whether we're going to have a meeting dedicated solely to it or prior to the council meeting. So, okay, moving on to item 4A. We have the May 24th regular council meeting minutes for adoption. Moved. Seconded by Councillor Cole. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. June 7th, 2022, special council meeting minutes 4B. Move for adoption.
Move.
Seconded. Yep. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right. Item 5A. We've got a letter from a resident asking about weekly garbage pickup. So it's a topic that we've maybe have heard residents ask us about on the street before, but finally we've had a letter come forward. So what are your thoughts on moving to weekly garbage pickup? Councillor Downey?
This really is a seasonal event for our town. Bears come out in May and they're usually gone by October. I'm wondering if we could explore having weekly pickup for garbage during those months, or explore the option or find out what the fee would be.
So my motion that I would suggest is to have staff engage with Fox's Disposal on the feasibility of weekly pickup and the costs associated.
I was curious to hear what other council members thought.
Go ahead, Councillor Barron.
I was gonna say, and or the option of additional dumpsters during this time. Because you go up to the Public Works yard and it's overflowing, it's stuffed full. And then I was out at the marina and there's people that live in town are stuffing garbage into the marina. And I know our commercial dumpster, we've had people stuffing stuff into there. So if the weekly garbage is not a option, is there an option for additional dumpsters for that seasonal time period?
I know in talking with staff on that topic, that currently it comes out of each department's budget. So it definitely would have budget implications for us to dedicate directly to that so that it wouldn't diminish the budget of various departments. So the motion could read to have staff engage with Fox's Disposal on the feasibility of weekly pickup, costs associated, or the option of additional dumpsters.
I sat on the, what do you call it, the Solid Waste Committee, and Fox's Disposal, at the time, he was very disappointed that Port Hardy went to daily pickup because of the environmental impact. And I think that needs to be considered as well. We're considering doing this. A couple extra dumpsters at Public Works or whatever would be a lot more environmentally friendly than having the truck run around. And I recently locked my commercial dumpsters, so it's probably my fault. Blowing it down. But to be honest, the pickups went in half once I did that. So there's definitely a need, a seasonal solution in favor of, but I'm not in favor of. I think it's a total budget discussion. If we're thinking we could also implement this real quick, I don't know. We could, it'd be a significant expense.
Yeah, and the thought here is this just would be a staff direction, so we could get an idea of costs. And certainly if it is budget implications, it wouldn't be something that we would institute right away. It would have to be part of the fall budget discussion.
Yeah, I would just close with, we have very busy staff and a very busy time and to get this implemented timely matter other than extra dumpsters. Like I said, I think it's a larger budget issue we should have tackled earlier. And that could be the response to the concerned citizen here.
Okay.
It's a significant budget issue.
So any other comments on that? The motion again reads to have staff engage with Fox's Disposal on the feasibility of the weekly pickup costs associated or the option of additional dumpsters. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, next we have item 5B, grant and aid. This is for information, just letting council know the update on the current status of the COVID-19 grant application that was made. Move receipt would be in order. Second by Councillor Cole. Okay, any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, moving on to item 7A. Again, for information from Chris Rue, our manager of visitor experience on Canada Day. You see some of the activities that are planned. Our manager of visitor information is here today if you have any questions for him. I think we're also looking for volunteers for the dunk tank other than just me. Any questions for him?
I've got a question.
Go ahead.
Might sound a little weird. Do you change the water after each dunk tank? Is it cold or warmed up? Yeah, it's got to be cold.
I'll bring the ice.
So move receipt. Okay, second. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Sorry, I should have asked. When will the posters be coming out, Mr. Wu? Okay. Thank you. Okay, item 7B, we have our annual report. It doesn't need to be adopted or anything, but if you had a chance to read through it, if there are any last minute changes or suggestions, this will be put online, I believe, and made available for the public. There is a statutory requirement for 2 weeks prior, which is tomorrow.
I guess I just had one comment that just caught me a little off guard because it's the first I heard of it. Volunteer fire rescues looking for a boat for the increased number of marine incidents. So like if that's a serious initiative, that's going to be funded by tax dollars. I'm not sure it should be in there if we've, you know, like maybe I missed that. I'm on page 29 of 66 in the agenda. Yeah, so you know it's fine to have goals, but if you're not really, if the liaison's unaware of it, or you know, this is our annual report.
Mhm.
And most of these things here were actually 2021 accomplishments. as opposed to 2022 goals. The only thing I see there is the boat as a goal.
Pumper shelter hasn't been done yet, closure. Yeah. Yeah, purchase of, yeah, there's some, those are, I guess, is goals the right word? Maybe.
We've had the discussion about the pumper one, right? At least we
Mhm.
know, we kind of know it's going to be a community thing. We didn't budget for it. So I'm just going to motion that we take out looking into a boat for increased number of marine incidents. One change to the report.
Seconder for that?
Can I hear the motion again?
To change the Allen report to remove page 29, one sentence, looking into a boat for the increased number of marine incidents.
Was that actually meant to say 2021 goals? Ignoring the part about the boat. Was that topic meant to say 2021 goals? Because we're 2021 report.
Except that they, sorry, I'll let her answer because they do ask for us for goals for 2022, I believe as well. Go ahead, Council.
Yeah, so through the chair, it's 2021 accomplishments and 2022 goals. So I can just check back at the document I received from him and let you know. Just one second.
I'll second that motion.
Just if there was more information or whatever, but I think that's
I
a
don't think-
long-term goal, but if that's a 2022 goal, perhaps we should have a discussion on capital. There's lots of ramifications, also in training.
Please, Brenda.
Sure. So through the fire chief's submission, it's goals for 2022. Okay. So maybe it'll be on his capital budget submission next fall.
Go ahead, Councillor Downey.
Just with respect to the motion on the floor, it states looking into a boat, or, maybe the wording is wrong, but I read that as he's researching the possibility or the eventuality of a boat for the harbor. And the follow through would be a budget request coming up for our 2023 budget discussion, which will happen this fall. So, or, maybe the wording looking into a boat, maybe it's looking for a boat, or exploring it. So maybe it's just poor wording.
Mhm.
But I mean, there's usually a lot of research that goes into ahead of ideas that get brought to council for budget discussions, and that's how I view that. So I'm happy with it to stay there.
Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It is defeated. Okay. Any other suggestions? Otherwise, we'll move along. Okay. Moving then to item 7C, we have a staff report on the BC Active Transportation Grant. So this is a grant that we were awarded at the time when we had applied for the grant. Thank you, Chris. At the time that we had applied for the grant, the allocation, what we were responsible for, there was no resolution how to fund the difference. So the recommendation coming from staff would be a motion that the $124,536 be funded through the Community Works Fund, formerly known as the gas tax.
I'll move that.
Moved, seconded. Okay. Anybody have questions for staff on that?
Assuming that fits material and the gas tax, that's why it-
Other questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
Just a point of order, were we supposed to motion approval of the annual report?
No.
Were we
No.
just receiving it for
Yeah.
information?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's,
Okay.
we're supposed to make it public and have it available to the public for 14 days, and then it needs to be submitted before June 30th. So
Okay.
this meeting allows for that.
Yeah, there was much discussion all day long and much research to find out if we had to adopt it or if what the whole process was. It's our Sophie report at which we will have to adopt before. Yeah. Okay. Good question, though. Item 8A, we've got the revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw. And this is one we do every year. It's anticipation of money we may have to use if we don't get all of the income tax, no, sorry, property tax in time, correct? Could you, I didn't explain that right, but if you want to explain it better than I just did,
I
that would be
think you-
great.
You got the gist of it. So
Okay.
it's basically an operating line, and if we need to use it to pay, we collect school tax and police tax on behalf of other government agencies. So they also have a due date. So if we don't have all of our funds to do that.
A motion for second and third reading.
Of bylaw 713, 2022. Seconder for that? Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Okay. Next, we have a staff report on the Broughton Strait campground laundry facility proposal. So staff has answered our questions via having the building inspector look, having the fire chief contacted, and also having an electrician take a look for the electrical panel concern that was mentioned last time. So go ahead, Councillor Downey.
The report says that we would receive the report for information, but was there not, this report came as a result of an ask by the contractor, and there's no mention in here, so. Do we need to bring back the contractor's request back to the table?
That's a good question.
I personally recall what the proposal was, so I'd be comfortable with just referencing a motion to approve the contractor's proposal from last meeting.
Or what we could do, the motion I wrote out is motion to allow staff to negotiate a mutually acceptable arrangement for laundry services to be provided at the campground. There were a couple of details that had to be worked out that weren't completely spelled out in the proposal from the campground manager.
Finance related.
Yes. Yeah.
Is there a motion on the floor?
Just trying to determine that. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to motion that we receive this report. I think it's a fantastic report. It addresses the questions that were that had arisen at our last council meeting. So I'm just going to motion that we receive the report, receive and file, and then we can deal with the other after.
And I'll second that.
All those in favor? Opposed, carried.
I was going to motion then that based on the report that we just got that tells us that there's no safety concerns with that building, that we direct staff to go back to the proponent and work out what would make sense, mutually agreeable
Yeah. Arrangement for laundry services.
arrangement for laundry services.
So the motion would be that based on the report, staff will revisit the request of the campground operator and negotiate the terms.
Connor, if you can read out that just to make sure that everybody's comfortable with what you captured. Oh, sorry, a seconder. Have we got first and second?
Second.
Okay, thank you.
To your worship, that staff go back to the campground operator, request a proposal for laundry facilities and negotiate a mutually acceptable arrangement.
Staff, yeah.
Any questions?
I'm completely, well, first of all, we need a seconder, right? Or do we have?
We did.
Was-
Yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
I'm completely opposed to the whole concept for quite a few reasons. First of all, we pay for the propane and the water and the electricity there. Secondly, I saw the stuff that's in there. I'd be lucky if it lasts a season. When it breaks, who's fixing it? Because there's no fee for using it, if it's not in operation, you just can throw your clothes in and it's free. So who's collecting money, right? The operator's not there all the time. So we're paying for the gas, the electricity, the water, the structure, the risk. And we're getting zero for it, and we'll probably be liable if the thing breaks, because now we've promised these people that they get laundry. Anywhere else in any other campground in this country, you would pay for your laundry. $2 a load to wash it, $2 to dry it. This is free. And
No,
we're
so
giving it
in the
to 'em.
proposal, it wasn't free. She was saying that there would be a key lock. It would be part of when people book the campground, they would also book a laundry fee as well. And so those terms would be negotiated with the CFO and then the campground manager to ensure that we wouldn't be behind. And as I recall, I believe even the campground manager is the one who purchased on their own the machine, a brand new machine as well. So.
I have the confidence that our CFO is going to look at the balance sheet for both sides and she's not going to go and sign something or agree to something that's going to put us behind.
Whenever something doesn't cost any money, and like anybody who has a code to the door can do laundry, I could guarantee that those machines will be going nonstop and it's not going to earn us any money. Propane's expensive and we're paying for it. So
Okay, go
good
ahead
luck
to our,
with that.
to our CFO. Mhm.
I can just comment that some of those expenses are included in the contract terms. And it's not going to cost the town any additional funds or expenses to run that. I
Guaranteed.
guaranteed it's not going to cost the town an extra penny to do that.
So I support this if we're not responsible for the machines. If That's
Yeah,
your,
that's-
the intention
yeah.
of your.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Okay, that motion is carried. Item 9B, street performer pilot project. So there is no report here, but for us to council, what we heard last week was that can we make this as easy as possible for us to do this pilot project? We would need a motion that council introduce a business licensing fee for $20 for street performers for the duration of the street performer pilot project from June to December 2022.
So moved.
Second it. Discussion on that?
I have a question.
Yep.
So do we have to redo our fee bylaw?
Not if we do that this way. We could run the pilot project. If it works, we redo the bylaw at that time. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. It's under new business. I did not, I forgot to mention because it was on the other page. We don't, council reports are missing here. I did hand out a sheet to everyone. Just being aware that Island Coast Economic Trust, I was at a meeting. I think it's important just to mention this. They are currently sitting at only $4.5 million. And without securing a commitment from the province, next year will be Island Coast Economic Trust's last year. Flip the page over, you can see what Island Coast Economic Trust has to work with, what it means per resident, Southern Interior and also North Central Coast. Their two trusts had an initial investment of much more than ours did, and therefore they were able to invest. And now, for example, Southern Interior is estimated at over $1 billion worth. So they are now making I think this week, they will be before the budget committee, making a plea. And there will shortly be speaking notes that we can take with us to UBCM. So as we speak to different provincial representatives, iced tea has been something that has been extremely beneficial to both Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities in our region. And I think it's imperative to see some funding go back into this so that it can be able to be sustained in the long term. So just wanted to make that, make you aware of that. Go ahead, Councillor Downey.
Just a question. I wonder, because when this was established, the community of Langford and some of the Southern Gulf Islands were not included in this. And they were brought into this, I believe, probably 2018-ish, 2019. How much has that drawn down our resources here?
I can find that out for you. I don't know that offhand. I will get that answer for you. So basically just to make you aware of this. Okay. Any other council reports?
I was going to email this out to everyone and I forgot. We did have a harbor meeting last Thursday night, and we did talk a lot about the washrooms, the showers, and a couple things that I just wanted to put into council's ear. The hazard assessment on that building has come back as clear. So there are not, there's not asbestos, there's not other hazardous substances that would require a special plan to get rid of it. We're fortunate on the committee that we have a past Public Works manager. And he mentioned that 10 years ago, he put a patch on that roof on the southeastern side because the building was going to be torn down the next year. So he'd only patched it. They didn't actually redo the roof, which it needed the shingles replaced, but they did a patch. The building inspector did go through the building, and without any prompting from staff, the first thing he said was, why are you not getting something on skids that you can not move, was his first word. His first word was resell when you make a determination what you're going to do, whether you move it or you sell it and you build something permanent. Again, having Glenn there and a couple other gentlemen who seem to understand about pump stations, et cetera. The only possible kind of feasible place without getting into lifts and boy things is where the old WFP guest house used to be. And apparently that was brought into the sewer system at some point, and there was still a lot of maintenance, plugging, drainage issues. It never drained properly or successfully. So if we were to put a permanent building in, that could be an option of where to go, but it would be a behind the eight ball kind of option to start with. Where staff is looking at putting this skidded building, the old building's here, Ferries is here, the ocean is here. They're talking about this one, the old one being torn out, putting the new one this way, which would then give you a couple of parking spots along the front here. The door access would be here towards the parking lot. And one of the other comments that I think we needed to put under our hats, because I certainly wasn't aware of it, but the majority users of the bathrooms are not fishermen coming off fishing. They're not commercial fishermen coming off the boats. They're actually pleasure cruisers, yachts, whatever you want to call the people who get in a boat and sleep on it and move up and down the coast. The other thing that they've noticed in the last 18 months is they're getting an increase in campers. People who are bush camping around our area or dry camping are coming in and using those showers. So the actual commercial fishermen is not the high percentage of the users. So the recommendation, if you will, from the Harbor Committee was for 2 shower stalls with toilets, which our group had actually, or Rebecca and Julian had actually sourced a quote for a trailer. I believe it was actually a company out of Nanaimo, and it had 2, I want to say it was 12 feet wide and 27 feet long. And you would walk in the door, you would have a countertop, a sink, and enough room that if you were taking a kid in there and you were trying to handle a bag and a towel, you had somewhere to put your stuff so that it didn't end up on the floor in the water. And then it had a shower stall and a toilet at the back. So their thought was 2 shower stalls with toilets, 1 accessible shower stall with a toilet, and then possibly on somewhere in there, there's an electrical room or water closet, whatever you want to call it. And then 1 toilet and sink that face towards the parking lot, and 1 toilet and sink whose door faced towards Beach Drive, because that's another clientele, is actually people that are waiting for the ferry. And so they felt that if there was a door on Beach Drive, you would be able to get kind of the people that are walking along there, and you wouldn't be feeling like you were walking into the shower area kind of thing. Port Alice's building that they had pulled in actually has an office, bathroom with showers and laundry facility, and they were 140,000 for that building. And apparently it's pretty skookum. It's pretty nice, and it's serving their purposes really, really well. The group did look at the different quotes that had been received, and there was some concern that the quotes, like we were thrown 117,000. Well, that $117,000 quote, there were pieces missing that one other quote actually had all in. And basically, I'm taking a page out of Ryan's book. Right when we first went on council, you made a comment that when we budget an amount, why on earth, if you were bidding it, wouldn't you go look online, see what our budgeted amount was, and then bid it to that amount? We have a budgeted amount right now of $100,000. It's not going to be $100,000, guys. It's going to be like 140, 150. I think we would get what we want. It might be 120. It might be 170. But why can we not put it out to tender and at least get a quote that we could then act on? Because I think we have to go through BC bid because it's over 70. So instead of having these meetings where we're looking at quotes that, bless their hearts, the manager's gotten, but they're out of date now because they're 6 months old, why do we not move to tender it with the recommendation of the committee being 2 full shower units with toilets and water closets in them, 1 accessible shower toilet, and then 2 water closet only units. Put that out to tender and let's see where it comes back and what it lays, because I think that's the only decision we have to make is what do we want in it. And maybe in the winter, you don't need the two plain ones. You just need the accessible in one. Port Alice's it opens up at 5 in the morning and it closes at 10 at night. It's all done through Wi-Fi locks. Glenn did strongly suggest that if we go with a pay system, that we go with tokens, and that it be advertised that it is tokens, because he said they had more damage when they put the coin operated showers in. They never got the money, but it cost a small fortune for the drywall and all the repairs that they was taking them to try and get the box off, because the boxes were really locked tight. So that was the only other kind of recommendation that came up, was that it goes to a token if there isn't a credit card kind of feasible way to do it, or a debit card. Can I make a motion on that? Or how does that work? Can we think about it and then it be on the next agenda so that we can do that? Because we have the money budgeted, so.
So my suggestion was, I would love if you would be able to put that in. I'd like to see that in the form of a report, get it out to us as soon as possible. Put that on, because I know that we have directed staff to do something. So, are those 2 things? I think it was to do with a permanent structure. So,
The permanent structure problem was that because what we received at the meeting actually had this additional project information and had town staff actions to date. They haven't been able to get a local contractor to kind of even come and give them an idea. And there was a new gentleman there, and as well the chair, Mr. Darwin, both said, if you actually want something done with a building that was supposed to be torn down 10 years ago, you're going to have to go to a modular system, because between contractor availability, everything else, you're looking at another 2-3 years. And when they took the building inspector in, the water is actually going underneath the tray, the pans of the showers, and the floor is actually at a squishy spot now. Somebody's going to go through it, was the comment, I guess, either staff or the building inspector when they were together. It's done. It's probably done 10 years ago, but it is really done now.
I guess because time is of the essence, and this building should have been gone 10 years ago. I can appreciate waiting for a report, but as Councillor Barron prepares that report, could we maybe ask staff to find out and maybe begin some legwork as far as an RFP for this project with the information to be followed through. So that when we meet next time, we can actually make a decision on.
Finalize them.
Yeah, I guess my
June
thing would be, I know that the committee had suggested the 2 showers plus 1 accessible shower plus 2 more bathrooms. Maybe council might have other input as it's into saying maybe
True.
only 1 bathroom or whatever, right? So so before we ask staff to, this is where I'm struggling, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I do want to move on it as well. I mean, this has been, it's kind of like the pool and other things, you know, it's been on the radar for quite
OCP.
some time. OCP, go ahead, Councillor Cole.
My sort of main concern is how this gets put out to tender. Like, is it going to be, we want a Ford F-150 brand new and that's easy for people to grasp and they all bid on it? Or is it a request for proposals? Do you bring your idea, your design?
No, I don't think it works that way. Go ahead. Oh,
It
we've
can't
got our,
work that way.
well, hang on a second. Our CFO is going to comment on
Yeah.
it.
So my experience with BC Bid, putting something out to tender, we can ask for proposals how they would do it, but we can also give out specifics. This is what we want and bid on what we want. So we have the same picture and getting, different quotes from everybody on what our intention is.
So do you foresee specs on, we want this exact toilet, this exact
No.
tap, all that stuff? Or it's, we want 2 showers and 4 washrooms? We want it modular, give us your best bid. And then somebody might bid with cheaper fixtures and others might better fixtures, and then we make that judgment.
We can do it that way, yeah. So we put down what we would like, and I mean, they can give us what they're going to supply, and we can determine, we can have different determining factors how we decide on which proposal we take.
Mhm.
So I mean, it could be on quality, it could be on price, it could be on several different factors, and we could weight it differently.
Timing.
Yeah, that's just where my main concern. It's not going to be apples to apples. And if it is, it's a lot of staff work to say, this is exactly what we want. You need architectural drawings, et cetera, to do that kind of the job properly. Whereas if you just say, we want more general guidelines to whoever wants to bid on it, see, pick the best proposal, create it accordingly.
Yeah, I think I would recommend that we have some specifics that, like you said, the drawings, things like that, but down to what taps we use or what toilets we use. I mean, we can ask for the quality or the brand, those types of things, and that would be part of our decision making. But I think if we want certain specifications, we want certain number of bathrooms, certain dimensions. I mean, we state that, and that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, could get pretty complicated pretty quick. It's like, are we doing coin operated? Is it, how they're being paid for? We suggested we have GO quality toilets and vandal proof this and that. So
Councillor Barron, did you want to say something? And then,
They've already received quotes for items and what I understood, the quotes that were provided were, I don't want to say stock, but they were, you take a layout like this and you put it in, and then they made it into a little trailer drawing. So we asked for the 2 extra units to go on. So you add an extra 6 feet onto the size of the trailer, but they all were very similar in their layout drawings. And the group really felt that having that bit of space to have somewhere to put your stuff as opposed to narrowing them up.
okay, so we're getting a little bit into the nitty gritty of the.
We are,
yeah.
but if I put the comments from the meeting into a report to come to next week or next meeting, then at that time, we're looking to make a decision of what we tell staff to put into the RFQ, whether it is pink tiles and blue toilets, or whether it's just, we have this much space. We
What
want
can
the
you
doors
fit on
to-
this
We
space?
want the doors to open this way for this reason. Like, we just agree on that part of it, and we agree on the number of units.
Mhm.
That's what we're aiming to do.
I hope so. I
Okay,
mean, we've been
so-
talking about this for a long time, so
Yeah.
that certainly would hope so, yeah. Okay, any other council reports? Okay, so item 12A, motion that council go in camera under Community Charter, Section 91A, closing the meetings to the public regarding personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. I'll see if there are any questions from the public here tonight. I'll look first here. Any questions from the public? Nope. Any questions online? You can use the raised hand function if there is. Okay. Okay, great. No. And there's no press or media. Okay, motion to adjourn and go in camera. In favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, everybody.